For those of you that don't know me, my name is James Poulter. Everyone knows me as JP. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of a business called Vixen Labs, which for the past number of years has been focused in the voice and AI space, building conversational experiences and working alongside some of the world's largest brands and businesses to help them embrace, I suppose, the world of conversational artificial intelligence in all of its different guises. Originally, that was in the form of voice technology. We did a lot of work in the Alexa space, and over years have been able to move into thinking more about the world of large language models and the kind of next generation AI models that we are all becoming much more familiar with these days. But I've also had the pleasure of speaking at the Voice and AI conference on a number of years from originally before I ran the agency, when I was at the Lego Group leading the emerging technology team there. Come back as a speaker, as a sponsor, and also as a member of the advisory board, putting together our programming for this year as well, which I'm super excited about. And as part of that programming, one of the big things that we've been focused in on is the really disruptive role that artificial intelligence is playing in the world of media and entertainment. And so that's why we've put together this session as a kind of précis to some of the stuff that we'll be announcing and launching at the event in a couple of weeks' time. And as part of our journey at Vixen Labs, we also then joined House 337, which is one of the UK's leading communication firms in London, and have served a number of media and entertainment businesses and networked with many people in that space as well. And one of our friends and colleagues that we've decided to kind of bring into this session today as well is Jessica Davis. Jessica works at Gannett. I'll let her introduce herself in a moment, and we'll be hearing from her after I've shared a little bit of content with you. And we're going to be having a discussion around how we see AI affecting that space as well. So that's what we're here for. But let's have a look at these poll results and kind of get a sense of where we're at with your answers. So I see we asked the question, does your organization have an ethical AI policy? 35% of you currently saying yes, 10% saying no. Lots of people working on it, which I'm not surprised that's the case. And one of the things that we're going to dive into later on today is how Gannett have been thinking about putting together their ethical AI work, some of the work that Jess has been doing in that space as well. So we're going to come to that. What I want to share with you, just to kind of get our kind of thoughts kind of rolling in this space, is a little bit of work that we've been doing around trying to, I suppose, just judge the moment that we're in when it comes to AI at this point in time, and really understand how the market is being driven by this space that we're in. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin up the video here in Spotlight so that you guys have got me here. I'm going to go and share a little bit of content with you guys. So hopefully you'll all get a sight of this now. And so what I want to share with you this afternoon, this morning, depending on where you are in the world. I'm calling you from London in the UK, so it's definitely afternoon for us. But I recognise lots of you kind of coming from other parts of the world. You're starting the day. And you may not think about starting the day with the kind of idea of a tornado, but maybe that's hopefully for some of you, that's not weather that you're experiencing right now. But I want to start with you with this kind of concept that I call the AI tornado, which is maybe just a bit of a thinking around where are we in this moment right now, and what is it that we're seeing in the space. So yeah, for those of you that have kind of dealt with this weather, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just I mentioned before, I lead the work that we do here at Vixen Labs, now part of House 337, and particularly my focus over the past year has been around technology ethics and AI ethics. And so that's going to be a theme of today's conversation, particularly in the world of media and entertainment. And at Vixen, and now part of House, we've had the opportunity to work with many media and entertainment brands in this space, in particular here in the UK with the likes of the BBC, across Europe with Al Jazeera, with Sony Music and Universal Music across the world, and also with many in the radio and television space, including HBO, Odyssey, TuneIn, and many others. And we've had the opportunity to build and manage some of the largest Alexa applications in this space, work with many of these big music publishers in helping their content be discoverable in the world of AI, particularly when it comes to how your music gets found on different services. We also do a lot of work in the consumer goods world as well, and helping brands like Dyson and McDonald's, helping them kind of connect with their customers through this different type of technology. One of the things that we've seen through our work over the past couple of years is that these different platforms have gone through multiple shifts, from being utility companies to entertainment companies, from entertainment companies to just channels in and of their own right for carrying entertainment properties and media properties. We've worked with the Amazon team for a number of years, helping them build what they call the custom Alexa themes. Some of you might have enabled some of these at different times for different movie properties that are available today, many others as well. And through that process, what we've learned is that we are at a kind of interesting moment of seeing the intersection between human and artificial intelligence change the way in which we manage our media, the way in which we connect with audiences and customers, and the way in which we build the next generation of experiences. And what that requires of us is a new way of thinking about strategy. It requires a whole new level of innovation. And we have to also have a development solution process that marries ethics and empathy and creativity. And I think you're going to find this conversation is very much around those three words: ethics, empathy, and creativity. These are the things that we are trying to work through. What does that look like in a world where AI and human intelligence need to kind of come alongside each other? So let me talk to you about the tornado. And I want to track back to my first experience of working in the media, just as a little bit of a kind of intro story. I started my work career as a journalist working in the radio industry in London. And I was starting my morning one morning broadcasting the news on our local London radio station. And I was about to do what's called an outside broadcast. This is when you've got, many of you may know this, but when you've got someone out in the field ready to kind of throw to, they're going to answer the mic and they're going to take a story. And I was working with my colleague Ahmed, who was working in Northwest London. And I think he was reporting, I don't remember this fully right, but I think he was reporting on a badger cull that was about to be conducted in somewhere in North London to kind of rid North London of badgers for some reason. Anyway, that was the story I was reading on my news prompter in front of me. I was halfway down the story when my producer, who was in the booth opposite me, I couldn't speak to, couldn't see, but they were the one in charge of the words in front of the screen, deleted the bottom half of my script. As I was reading it, I was going down the lines and I saw this bottom half of the script disappear. And what began to be typed at the bottom was, scrap that story. We're going to talk about a tornado in Northwest London. And for those of you that don't live in the London orbital area, which I'm sure is many of you, you may live in a part of the world where tornadoes, hurricanes, the big weather that you have, particularly in the US, are more common. In London, that doesn't happen very much. We get a lot of like drizzle and rain and grayness, but tornadoes, not something we encounter on the regular. And so this definitely made the news that a tornado is ripping through North London. However, I didn't have a script to read. All I had was these lines that were being typed in front of me. And I think this is how many of us maybe feel at the moment around the world of AI, particularly in the media space. Not only is a tornado whipping up so much around us, and feels like a vortex of stuff, but it's also emerging at such a pace that we can barely keep up with it. We thought we were reading one script, and all of a sudden we're having to start learning and reading another one in near real time. And I think for any of you that have watched announcements over the past week from the likes of Google, from the likes of Meta just last night with the Orion glasses, and some of you may even be catching up on that news, AI is moving at a pace that even those of us that work in it, who spend every day thinking about it, is moving at a pace which I think even we would say is hard to keep up with. And that vortex is really swirling. So AI is everywhere all at once. And I think that is the moment that we are living in. And what I want to talk about is just maybe some of the things that we see happening in the media industry in particular that is driving the updrafts of that vortex, and some of the compression factors that are the downdrafts creating that vortex. And then I'm going to have a conversation with Jessica and unpack some of those thinking. Three things that I think we see are kind of blowing the wind of AI at the moment. The first is the hype cycle. I think we have reached the absolute peak of expectations, and we may be, some of us, falling into the trough, as Gartner call it, of disillusionment around AI. But at the same time, emerging use cases are beginning to penetrate and actually break through. And for those of you that maybe have followed the updates that Google released earlier this week at their Google Cloud event, they showcased over 100 different real-world use cases of actual companies using this stuff, using the Google Vertex platform. Many other platforms available. I'm not here to endorse Google's product specifically, but to say that there are real use cases, I think, is true now, which for the past 24 months maybe hasn't been the case. So we're going to unpack a couple of those in a moment. And the third thing that's really fueling this hype cycle is that enterprises are seeing what I would call bring your own AI. AI off the side of the desk, AI through the back door, up the fire escape, and in some cases slamming in through the front windows as well. That people are bringing their own models, their own tools, their own subscriptions to the office, maybe not always disclosing that. But one of the big things that enterprises are also fueling is that they're adopting things like Copilot. They're adopting things like kind of Google infrastructure, and AI is kind of coming into all aspects of the business. And I think what's really different here than previous media revolutions that we've experienced, whether that was social, whether that was the metaverse, depending on how you feel about that, and how we feel about even the web originally, is that this isn't something that enterprises are really getting to opt into. It's kind of happening by design because it's AI inside of many of the tools, products, and systems that we already use. It's not about necessarily signing everyone up for ChatGPT Enterprise. It's in Canva, Notion, HubSpot, Salesforce. Name your product. Everyone's got an AI thing. And because of that, the enterprise is actually also the main adopter of AI. And anyone that watched the Salesforce event last week, Agentforce, as they began to unveil what that kind of agent infrastructure looks like, or as I say, Google's infrastructure this week around creative agents, this is the stuff that's fueling this. The thing that I think, though, we've got to hold on to, if you want to kind of hold on to the hide under the stairs or in a doorway of AI at the moment during this tornado, to extend that metaphor, is we need some operating principles. And I think one of the operating principles that we hold really dearly at house at Vixen Labs is this idea that AI isn't the goal, the customer is, the audience is, the person we're speaking to is. And that's the thing that I think we're also having to try and temper people's expectations in this hype cycle. No matter how much hype there is, AI shouldn't be our objective. The customer or the audience should be. So there are rainbows ahead. I mentioned that there are new use cases emerging in all different areas, from customer services to product experience, data analysis. In some of these demos that Google shared this week, we've seen examples of Puma integrating AI into the way that they create product images, through to Warner Brothers Discovery doing multilingual captioning, and Meta last night showcasing that they could now do real-time audio translation on the Meta framed glasses. These are the black ones that I've had for a little while. I'm now definitely eyeing up the translucent ones that they released yesterday. So we're seeing this kind of swirl happen, use cases emerge, and also platforms being really upended. Particularly search is one of the things that we're most interested in. And I think not just search when it comes to Google or Perplexity and the fight between these different search engines, but also what this means for on-site search, catalog search, navigating our own websites. Large language models tuned with our own content, often in the form of retrieval augmented generation, RAG models, are making it possible for us to have much more natural language, voice-driven in some cases, search experiences within the walled gardens and domains of Spotify, of Apple Music, of Pandora, of Apple TV, of Gannett Media, USA Today, of Condé Nast, these different entities having their own models of search that was just previously unavailable to us. So search is changing in a big way. And what it means is that the experiences that customers are going to get are also changing. Here's just an example from the finance world. We're seeing people move from keyword stuffing and getting things up the rankings, paid PPC, into much more discursive answers. And people are expecting more from their content, not just to be able to get the answer about where this content is, but the metadata that surrounds our content is becoming more valuable than it's ever been before. It's no longer about just being able to put things into playlists. It's about being able to really immersively understand the content libraries that we have and actually find new purposes for them, whether that's creating new formats, distilling things down into new show formats, for example, adapting and moderating scripts for social media. There are so many different places where we're seeing the power of these large language models that can be applied against our content, create new use cases. One of the things that we've been particularly interested in is how will we be able to map the way in which subject matters, topics, and things like that begin to show up in large language models. We've been doing some work at house to think about how we might map large language models and their opinions on different topics. This is going to be really fascinating in coming into the world of politics, the world of media, where we begin to chart the way in which stories are emerging. And so we can begin to do things like using website analytics, SEO and PR, and actually create catalogs of questions that we can ask these AIs and be able to give us output so we can do better competitive benchmarking, that we can do subject analysis. We can understand, kind of what candidate is looking like they're more popular inside of these different AI tools. So the whole world of SEO auditing and mapping is also being transformed. So these are the things that we see, kind of the upward pressures. Let's talk about the atmospheric pressure, the stuff that's kind of slowing down the adoption, perhaps in many cases. Up until this week, where Google announced a bunch of these use cases, I wrote something earlier this week on LinkedIn, which basically was around how it's quite odd, isn't it, that most of us who have been around the tech space for a while are used to the big keynotes at WWDC or at Meta's events or Google I/O, where halfway through, some tech executive from another big brand, a household name, gets wheeled out on stage and says, "Look at our amazing demo of what we've done." And up until this week, that's been pretty missing from most of these updates, whether you think about OpenAI's updates or Anthropic or anybody like that. They're not showing, hey, here's the big shiny enterprise use case. But that's just beginning to change. And I think that's going to be really interesting. So one of the big things that has been, kind of keeping that kind of dampening effect, I think, has been just the lack of examples, but we're seeing that emerge. But there are three other things that I think are slowing down the adoption. Last night, we did a roundtable dinner here in London with a couple of folks from the publishing industry, from the media industry, including a couple of our big UK broadcasters and publishers. And one of the big things that they were talking about was that there's this hallucination going on. And what do I mean by that? Well, is that people still seem to be trapped in this idea that you can't control these models, that all they do is make stuff up. And whilst we know that that can be true, and there are problems there, so much work has gone into making these models much more effective in what they do, that actually I think that's a myth that is beginning to be busted, but is slowing people down. The second is around regulatory fear. Here in the European Union, we've got well, we're not in the European Union here in London, as you know, after our kind of, cataclysmic, juncture with Brexit a couple of years ago. But for the rest of Europe, the AI Act that's being published and now is being ratified in 27 member states across Europe. We have obviously the AI Bill of Rights that's been proposed in the US. And we also have in the UK something called the Online Safety Act. These different regulatory pressures are coming in and they are slowing down adoption as people try and work out, what does it mean for us to do AI? Are we going to be compliant? How are we going to handle things? And the third thing is platform lock-in, that people are concerned about not betting on the wrong horse, particularly when it comes to media. One of the big things we see is obviously lots of concern from the music industry, from the imagery industry, from video rights holders around how are these models trained. And we've seen the likes of Universal Music Group and Vicini and people like that take very large stances and saying, we will not adopt models that have been trained on copyrighted IP. All the way through to individual contributors, comedians, artists, actors, Taylor Swift, all of them pushing back on the potential that AI has trained on their models, and they don't want an involvement with it. And because of those pressures, many of the big players, particularly in the media space, are worried about backing the wrong horse, so to speak, in this race. So these things are slowing things down. And so we talk about this hype cycle, and we're going to get into this now with Jessica in a minute. It's like, where are we on this scale? I would love if you yourselves, just as you are watching us, would maybe just jump into the chat and just say, okay, where on the hype cycle do you think you are in your feeling about AI? Would you put yourself in the peak of inflated expectation? Are you in the trough of disillusionment? Hopefully, if you're on this call, you're probably not too far down that trough. But maybe you are and you want to be re-inspired. So maybe just drop into the chat wherever you are. Where on this scale, this continuum here, would you put your attitude to AI? Can you just do that for me and just get a sense that people are there and live? Let's see. Okay, innovation trigger stage. Okay, so still at that stage. Thanks, Donna, for that. I'm sure many of you will find that you're at different points on this curve. And as you can see, for those of you that haven't seen this chart before, this is obviously mapping different parts of AI across the spectrum. And when we talk about AI, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So maybe this is where I'll pause it and bring Jessica in. We'll get into this. Jess, thanks for being with us for this call. And I've really enjoyed our conversations over the past couple of months talking about where this stuff is at. Maybe just before we get into it, do you want to just come off mute and give us a bit of an intro to who you are, what's your role at Gannett?
Yeah, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Jessica Davis. I've been at Gannett for 8 years and really came up in my career as first a journalist and then have just continued to reinvent myself following our users, right? Just being very audience focused in my career and actually found my way to AI about 5 years ago. To my current role as head of AI product for Gannett. I have an additional role where I am also co-chairing our AI Council, which is what we call our governance to ensure fair, safe, and responsible use of AI in our organization. So it's great to see kind of where people see themselves all over on that cycle. And what I would share, James, is that cycle is not linear, right? In
That's
terms
right.
of
Yeah.
the speed that these tools are coming out, changing. That's our constant when it comes to AI right now. And a lot of the conversations that I continue to have, both internally in my company and with smart folks like you on this panel and in our audience today.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Jess, maybe people that aren't as familiar with Gannett, just maybe you could give us a little bit of the high level on the organization, what kind of publications you guys are looking after. Most people would know USA Today, but we also have people from other parts of the world. Maybe just unpack to us, what does the organization look like? And particularly, what is the impact that AI is having on different parts of that organization right now?
Oh, thanks for that question. Yes, Gannett includes USA Today and 200 plus local news sites across the United States. So we're really from coast to coast. We're almost in all 50 states, not quite. And that's a really unique part of where we are at Gannett in terms of, we are more than half of the US digital audience touch our publications in a given month. So we're large and that's what we tend to do. In terms of where we're at Gannett, yes, we do have some AI products that include generative AI that I'm happy to talk about today a little bit. In terms of, our governance, I think you said it well, James. AI is not the goal, right? And the goal really that I'm part of and aware of in our company is that really AI is a tool, right, to enable, augment our people to do their best work. And so in that hype cycle, right, I think that really grounds us in, okay, what are the limitations of these tools? How can we responsibly use them toward really great outcomes, both for our employees and for our audience, right?
Yeah.
Because it has that promise, and not just a promise, it really can help you. But do you have the ethical framework and guidelines? Are you having these conversations in your organization?
Mm.
At Gannett, we created our generative AI guidelines and posted them on our site in April of 2023. It is not a one and done. We
No.
continue to monitor and update and evolve, which we always said we would do back in April of
Yeah.
2023. And we've continued to go at it. So it's a continuous exercise across our company.
That's right. And I think one of the things that we've seen here at House is, we also published guidelines at a similar kind of time frame last year. I'm in the process of doing our ethical AI review at the moment, looking at and updating those right now for us as we think about how does AI affect us on the agency side and as a creative studio. But I imagine that you've got a lot of stakeholders that might have interest and input into that at an organization like Gannett. Just talk to us a little bit about what you're doing to align the different needs of the business, because I think this is one of the things that people maybe find difficult when it comes to setting guidelines around AI is it's not owned by one person in the organization in the way that maybe social media was. It fell to you set up a social media team, right? You obviously kind of have an AI related job, but this is something that affects, I imagine, many more people across the organization. Just talk to us about how you've gone about gathering input and the types of different challenges that people are raising when it comes to building those guidelines.
Oh, absolutely. So, because these are tools, again, that people use. For Gannett, we have a requirement in our guidelines, and we had this from day one for human in the loop. Why? You said it well, that risk of hallucination, aka you know, the AI making things up. For a journalistic organization, that is not acceptable for our journalists and our audience. And so what we really talk about, the framework that we're operating under, okay, these tools, the use of them, it needs to benefit our employees, right? And it also needs to have a benefit for our audience and business. And so when we can align those things, that is an acceptable use that I would say we're in a pilot phase still of learning and understanding what success looks like, what does it take, A lot of governance conversations are around how do you stop bad things from happening? That's important, absolutely, and a big part of it. But also, can we, look at, okay, how can these tools be an enabler for our strategy, for the outcomes that we're aiming for, our goals as a company. And so one example that we have a couple. So we have some use cases on our business side. We've rolled out several tools with guidance. We wrote the guidance first, then we rolled out tools and offered, training and support for that to
maybe let me just stop you on that point actually, because that's a really important point I think people need to hear is that you set the guidelines first and then you rolled out the tools. Just talk to us for a second, double click on that, on like why was that such an important way around to do it? Because we see a lot of people just experimenting, right? And then the kind of guidance emerges. What's the thinking behind that approach?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Some people will just experiment. You have your early adopters, and tapping into the groups like that is really important to have your champions that can help bring others along in your organization. Why that's important is that because of the limitations of with generative AI having accuracy concerns as a journalistic organization, we have to really get our arms around that. And there may be some on this call that aren't in the media industry. Maybe they're in different, sectors. For us, our audience has trust. We are a trusted brand. And so that is a table stake of we have we have a very high standard of accurate information in the service of our communities and our audience. And so that is just foundational for us and then giving the tools in a secure environment. So with these tools, right, how do they operate? Well, they have training data, not to get too technical, but we want to protect, right, our information. So that means we need a secure environment, right, as part of our guidelines. Hey, make sure you're not giving away our intellectual property, our content for free. Let's use secure tools where our content is protected, your work is protected, and we'll get the benefit, right, in secure ways. So balancing all the risks and the rewards together.
That's it. Risk and reward, I think, is a real question. I'll use this moment here to plug that we in a few weeks' time we're going to be hosting an event called the AI Power and Potential event. Ahead of our big research launch, we will be then bringing to the Voice and AI Summit. So if you're coming to Voice and AI, you'll be able to come and spend some time with us. Jessica, I think you're going to be there as well. So we'll be able to kind of meet with the team, talk about some of this content. But power and potential, I think, is a really interesting way of looking at this. And so I would love to kind of maybe dig into a little bit about what you see as the power and potential of these three different things, which is most of the big brands and audiences that we're working with are seeing three ways of kind of going about bringing AI into the organization. Once these guidelines have been set, they seem to be dictating how do you buy tech, how do you build tech, and who do you partner with for that technology. So maybe just talk to us a little bit about kind of how have you been balancing that kind of risk reward, that power potential kind of dynamic around what you buy and what you build and who you're partnering with. Because I think these are the things that many in the media industry are struggling with because, to your point, the training data that's already gone into the models in the first place, and then protecting the data that you as content creators already hold for the future. So maybe let's just take each one of those individually. When it comes to thinking about buying in the technology, how are you guys thinking about which partners to kind of bring in to be able to be compliant with what those guidelines look like?
Yeah, it all starts with when you write those guidelines, you need a vision for how AI can benefit your organization, right? That's what gets you to, okay, what value do you want to get out of it, weighing all the risks. And so before you even get to what tools do we need, you just have to be very clear-eyed there on the outcomes you're seeking. So for us, it was always AI as an enabler, especially on the business side. It's not replacing employees, it's augmenting their work, right? Enhancing it. It's a co-pilot, not the pilot, to assist our employees. And so when we go, it's like, okay, here are the outcomes that we want as an organization, gives you a lot of clarity in, okay, that means this has to be true, like our data has to be protected, human in the loop, all the different requirements that, okay, this is what we need to get to those outcomes. Here are the risks. And then because that's a lot of AI work is
Yes, a lot.
right.
Yeah.
It's a lot, it's tool adoption, it's risk management, it's understanding that regulatory fear that you talked about. There's very little regulation right now. California just passed something, with the EU Act. So what actually are we accountable for this? So that can then lead you to clarity around, okay, this tool ticks all these boxes on the governance side of, okay, this does give us a secure environment, or whatever you determine is
Yeah.
important to you in terms of what you're protecting, and what value you're hoping to unlock. If you're only in governance on the side of, bad things happening, it's
Yeah.
hard. You have to also balance that with pushing and
That's right.
pulling.
You want to move towards, well, and maybe that goes from that kind of power bit, the scary bit, and the potential bit. And maybe so, you're talking about how you bring the technology in, but keep it controlled, keep it contained. But you're also talking about as I said, that model kind of buy and then the build. Like, you're bringing this stuff in to build use cases, to build options. Maybe talk to us about some of the things that you guys have been experimenting with and building. And I think this relates to John's question in the Q&A. He asked, what kind of guardrails do your policies emphasize in your use of AI to generate media for publication? Maybe that's something that you're already thinking about. Talk to us about how we're kind of seeing this stuff build in the organization. What type of things are you experimenting with?
In terms of the traditional build, there's very little that it's getting cheaper and cheaper. I mean, just creating your secure layer on top, there's really not the need to go and build your own LLM from scratch, right? We've seen some early adopters do that. It was very expensive at the time, but the technology is continuing to get better and cheaper. So in terms of building, we just have to really define for AI, in terms of the tech you go after. It's very complex. And so in terms of like what your stack is, what can integrate, all those fun things. But at the end of the day, just getting to, hey, let's, in the pilot phase, it's very easy. And one of the benefits of this technology to prototype, to have, hey, here's just what this could be, so that we have that straw man that people can react to and say, yes, this works for us, or no, it doesn't. And there's a really important part in governance, around the feedback loops, right? How does this benefit your employees? So the builds that we've done, we've worked, on our news side. We have a lot of business cases where we have seen time savings on things like helping you write an email and summarizing, across not just our journalists, but across the organization on the business side. There's a lot there. When it comes to our news side, the part of my role that's over AI product, we did do AI summarization of our news articles. So that question about how we did it and how does the policies and guardrails go into place, because of our standard that a journalist has to look at anything an AI generates before it publishes, because of that risk of inaccuracy, right? We have a tool where it doesn't go live automatically, and it leads to, and we've had accurate, no hallucination summaries on the top of
Yeah.
our articles. Not all articles, we're still piloting here.
Sure.
And what we've seen from that is feedback from our journalists. We designed it with them, we embedded with them. They helped us get to the decisions about what we built, the experience of what it looked like for them and for our audience. We also researched and listened to our audience about how they felt about AI. What we found is our audience distrusts AI and trusts our journalists more, and they want us to include journalists. And it confirmed our approach of human in the loop. In addition, there's an expectation from our audience, we learned, that we disclose our use of AI.
Hmm.
So as I shared, the outcome is we believe the trust with our readers, with our audience is what we are protecting
Right.
and is part of our competitive advantage as a media organization. And so that's how that showed up in this product that summarizes the top. Now, we talked about the benefit to the journalists, like they're in the loop, it saves them
Yeah.
time. How did it benefit our audience? It's still early days. Directionally, we're seeing improved engaged time. So people, when there is a summary at the top, they are spending more time in those stories. And so that is encouraging part of that feedback loop of, okay, we're meeting expectations, we're managing our risks, and we're seeing a benefit, time savings, and ease of use for our journalists, more engagement in our stories from our audience. So that's how those guardrails can look for a use case like that, and that's a real world example, like you said, James.
Yeah.
It's still earlier days, but there are actual examples of AI creating value
Yeah.
for organizations.
I mean, it's super interesting because I think for the audience, particularly as we talked about audiences, and there's a question here as well about, Roy says in the chat, Jessica said AI is not the goal and not replacing but enhancing. What other nuance might general audiences most need to know that you've not mentioned? I think general public audiences are still just getting to grips with this themselves. As I say, in a month's time, we're going to be publishing the AI Impact Report for the first time, which is a global study, 8,000 people across the US, the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands. And we already have some preliminary data, which I'm sneaking to you in this call if you're watching, which is that we know that around about two-thirds of people in the US and the UK have already used some kind of generative AI tool, but only 15% of them would say that they could describe what it is and how it works. There's a real gap between understanding and usage. And that goes when people use it, but also when they see it, when they see that AI little star diagram, which seems to have made become the de facto way we talk about AI now. I don't know how that happened. Everyone's got a little couple of little star icons next to a thing, and that means AI. Um, Talk to us a little bit about how general audiences are, feeling about this, adopting this, and do you also foresee that policy around, human always in the loop, when never everything has to pass through the lens of a journalist, in the light of some of these reasoning models that we're beginning to see from OpenAI and Google are saying they've got similar ones on the way, do you foresee that ever changing? And what would it take for that to change?
I love that question. All of these things will evolve with the technology as it becomes more reliable. But these models, they deal with probabilities. They they don't have we call it deterministic versus probabilistic, right? So because there's that probability, that chance of inaccuracy, that will remain in place, right? Because that is part of the trust with our audience. Now, that is the second part. As our audience, right now, when you research and you interview your audiences, really what you hear is most people think of AI as the sci-fi movie that's scary, right? And that's their experience with AI. When you look at the Chat GPT usage, for example, it's quite high and growing. It's not, though, everyone in the world. And so some people have not yet experienced AI except for in entertainment or the movies. And so that fearful view is they're bringing that perception to your experience. And so it's possible to move people, including your employees, including your audience, through the different stages of awareness and understanding about how AI can benefit. And that's why our policy of, yes, we will be in the loop and disclose when we use it is not, oh, I'm sorry, I'm using it. It's we use this and here's the benefit. Here's the guardrails around it, right? It's a statement of value. And so I think that confidence in how we talk about use will influence how our audience, right, thinks about how we use it. And it's on us as organizations to tell the story of how we're being careful, but the value it brings to the experiences, right? Well-being, you can hear very aware and cautious about the risks involved there. I think that real conversation is hard to have because what do we think about? This
That's right.
reader is on their phone, right? They have busy life. It's challenging, the information, right? The
Yeah,
time and attention economy, that is very difficult. We can move them forward by being very intentional and thinking through that
that's
whole
right.
journey.
I want to move you on to talk about this kind of last area around partnership. Um, in the next couple of weeks, Apple's going to be rolling out the Apple Intelligence features to those people that have got an iPhone 15 or 16. That we certainly know that's not the majority of the iOS user base, but it's a large proportion of it. Google is doing the same thing within the Android ecosystem, with all of its own tooling across the Assistant platform, and obviously kind of bringing together Gemini into its format. Out here on the other side of things, in the model maker world, we've got the world of OpenAI bringing new models. ChatGPT is becoming the de facto place that people are using chatbots in terms of in their desktop experience. We've seen Microsoft and Google saying they're going to bring this into many of their big office suites, which is going to transform work for many people. And then, of course, there are many other these kind of discrete models being used for image generation, video generation, music generation, etc. How are you thinking about the future relationship that Gannett and others like you might have with these partners in the future? We know that for many of the big media entities, we've seen the New York Times, we've seen many others, Vox Media, for example, do deals with OpenAI, the terms of which have not been disclosed, but the fact that the deals exist have been disclosed, which we can assume is some level of revenue share, other things like that. Talk to us a little bit about kind of how you see the future of partnerships, not necessarily just for Gannett, but in the space in general beginning to evolve. Have we, and maybe to put a pointed question on it, has the horse already bolted in terms of trying to claim back the IP that these models have been trained on? Should we care about that much? Like, what's the position?
Thanks for that question. It's an important one. I think just for looking at the whole space, look at how Microsoft partnered with OpenAI, right? A more legacy company aligning themselves there and the value that has brought to both. So I think that's a great model for the types of partnerships that can work in this space. Now, not all of us are Microsoft or OpenAI, but I think there's a lot to learn as we continue to see that relationship evolve. That was the big one that led to a lot of this moment. And I think it's worth continuing to watch that there. In terms of partnerships, I do think that we continue to be proponents for the value of our intellectual property as publishers. Yes, we have to do that, and continue to look forward to how can we really continue to unlock the value as we move forward. And when you're anchored in that governance, right, framework with the guardrails, when you're really clear-eyed about, hey, this is how AI can help us, that becomes more and more of a reality. And of course, has to make sense for your organization, its goals, and the risks that you're willing to take or not.
Yeah, no, we love that, and I think you're right that kind of mentality of kind of continuous improvement is the thing that everyone is going to have in mind as this stuff begins to shift and change. Whether or not that means a deal coming for any of these big partners with Gannett, I'm not going to put you on the spot to answer, but I'm sure there'll be discussions to be had. I want to take a couple of questions before we kind of wrap up this hour session and also kind of bring a few conclusions for you guys, hopefully to just kind of give some things to go think about. I love this question from CJ in the chat, which is, do you think AI hallucinations could be used as the new form of gonzo journalism? I don't know if that's the kind of thing that Jess, you have a perspective on. I would love if you do. I'd love your answer.
Uh, I think that there is play and fun to be had with these products when you're not talking about a news example where facts matter, right? If you get outside of that in a more entertainment space, why not? If the goal is fun entertainment, there are ways that you look at what Meta has in their suggested prompts for a lot of their products, and play is one of them.
Right.
Um, and so I think we're just at the beginning of that, and you just again have to be really clear about what your user expectations are on that, and if facts matter, that may be a risk you want to weigh very carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, you obviously go ahead and ask any other questions you have in the chat. We're going to wrap up in about 5 minutes time to give everyone 5 minutes back at the top of the hour to get to whatever your next thing is of your day, which I'm sure is the case for everybody here. You all live busy lives. But maybe let me bring kind of things in with a couple of thoughts and then maybe also a kind of a call to action. So let me just kind of come back into my slides here. So bringing us back just to maybe kind of this tornado metaphor, I thought I'd give you a couple of things that maybe you can react on how we might ride this AI storm that we're in at the moment. And here's some things I would suggest. One is that I think, as I said before, we know the knowledge gap here is still pretty wide, right? And I think we're seeing this still across even our own internal organizations. Just because there's been a lot of talk about AI doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is really actually using it yet, fully embraced, knowing the best way to get out of it. So I think that's one big thing that we're seeing. Basically, help people, help them learn, help them help themselves. Customers are wanting more flexibility. If you're on this call and thinking about how am I going to use AI to build the next thing, or what should I buy in, or who should I partner with, as those kind of three things I've been talking about, I think one big thing we're seeing is that people want flexibility. They want to be able to be malleable. No one knows who's going to win this race fully yet. It's very early. That's going to be a challenge. Jess, I wonder if your thoughts on these particular points 3 and 4. And what I mean by these is our first defense for us, we've seen at House, is building prototypes. There's a way of learning really, really fast. The challenge can be that the MVP can kind of also be our Achilles heel because people see a shiny object and think that that's done, but there's so much more underneath the hood. Has that been your experience?
Yes, I mean, it, you have to do that continuous improvement culture of a continuous learning, and really making sure that because the tech is evolving so much, yes, there's absolutely the under the hood part that has to be addressed, but there's also these things need to keep iterating because it's getting cheaper to do things. It's becoming faster. The rate of innovation here is not done and
That's
continues
right.
to accelerate. And so that is absolutely important. And when we talk about education, there is also that in that gulf, there's the skills you need to use the AI tools. And we didn't talk about that as much today, but that is a really important part of how you get there, in addition to the guardrails you have.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think final point is education, 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 not just because Tony Blair once said it on the steps of Downing Street, but because it's really important when it comes to AI is that we are all learning. And as I've said, we're learning fast together. There's a bunch of opportunities to do that in the coming weeks. So you can come and join myself and Jessica, colleague Ren, and our friends from SAG-AFTRA who've got some really interesting perspectives on this for the past year or so. Coming up in a couple of weeks' time at the Voice and AI Summit happening on the 28th through 30th in Arlington, Virginia. If you don't have tickets for that, please do head over to voiceand.ai. Links are in the chat. Also want to draw your attention to our AI Power and Potential event happening here at House 327. Now, if you're in the UK or you can be in London on the towards the end of October, we would love you to come and join us here. We'll have an in-person event on the 23rd of October before we head to Voice and AI to go and share this research with you. But if you would like a sneak peek, you can join us in person in London or you can join us virtually. Link to this event is also in the chat to go and register your interest. And if you register your interest in the event, you'll also be on the mailing list for getting the AI impact report when it releases on the 26th of October. So 23rd of October. So please go do and register for that. We've had some great questions. Thank you so much for all of you that have stayed throughout the hour and asked some really great questions and joined us in the chat. And we appreciate you getting online from wherever you are. I want to say a massive thanks to Jess for joining us and the team at Gannett for all that they're doing, pioneering the way. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us. and Jamie and Jessica Hart in the background for helping put this together with the team at Modev. For those of you that are coming to the conference, please do join us. Come and join us at the House 337 takeover for an hour together in the session that we will be having in a few weeks' time at the conference. And if you've got any other questions or you want to get in touch, you can do so by connecting with both of us on LinkedIn, as well as also dropping me an email. You can connect with me at jp@house337.com. Link to that is also for you in the chat. For now, thank you so much to everyone for being here. Jessica, thanks once again for sharing your insights with us. And we'll see you again soon on another one of these Modev panels. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or good night if it is where you are. Truman Show style. We'll see you again very soon. Thanks so much.